at what's new within Inventor and Vault 2025. My name is Caleb Funk. Today is what's new with Inventor 2025. What's new with Vault, and then kind of a Q&A at the end. So we'll take about 40 minutes here to go through some of these new features, to talk through some of these different things, and then we can take a look. We'll break it open for questions. So let's take a look at this. When we take a look at Inventor's new features and kind of talking through some of these things, one thing to remember is that, because like I said, I've been doing these for a while, right? So we used to have road shows. We went out and did all of this. And I'm seeing less, Inventor is very mature. It's 25 years old. It's been doing this for a while. And as we go through, the thing that I kind of forget is that there is a point release. So some of these things that we're seeing in 2025, like, well, is that new? I'm like, oh, that's right. It came out with 2024.1 or .2. So it's been around for a while. Overall, throughout the whole software, every little area that they've touched on, there's 142 some enhancements. If you've been to one of these before, I always say I just like to hit the high points, right? There's certain ones that stand out to me, certain things that are definitely useful. And then there's sometimes they updated a dialog box to make it a little easier to work with. A key thing about this is customer driven. So this is coming from the Inventor feedback community. So if you take a look at that, there is the Inventor Ideas Forum, right? That's where a lot of this comes from, and they do listen to that. I was at Autodesk University this year and talking to several people, and they said, yeah, that's where we get the information. I have clients tell me, hey, if you talk to Autodesk, tell them this. I'm like, honestly, they're going to listen to you more if you put that in the Inventors Forum and it gets a lot of hits, right? Like that's what that's about, as opposed to me saying something. So I just wanted to point that out. This is where a lot of this is coming from. And it's in a couple of different areas. We'll see with sheet metal. I'll play with that just a little bit. The idea of a modernized interface for that, how that comes together. Part modeling, couple little things, interesting. There's one I really like with assembly modeling. You see those colors there. I'll talk about that. I really like how that's set up. Few things with drawings that they've set up to help with some standards compliance, to make life a little bit easier. And then I'll point this out. Over the last 8 years, they've really, really driven the idea of having performance built up inside of Inventor. So it becomes a tool. We've got a lot more capability when we're looking at the performance portion of that. And then simple enough, this is really interesting to me. They've set it up that we can export Revit files to previous versions, which I thought was interesting. So a lot of times, if you're on a project using Revit, you may be on a particular version of that for some time. So the idea would be you could take that and export a previous version of that for them. All right, so I'm gonna keep on going here. Like some people are getting out of the webinar and coming back and getting some audio that way, so it must be something on GoTo's end. All right, so let's just talk about some general enhancements. These are some little things. It actually, and you'll see this when I bring it up in a minute, 2025, I really do like the way it looks. There's some improvements with when we're looking at a selection and we pick on it, it's going to be a little more obvious what we're picking. The highlighting for round surfaces, and I'll pick on a few of those, works a little bit better. It's just a little more clear, just some real simple general enhancements. It's just the graphics have improved and we can see that a little bit better. Another simple one, decals. I can have multiple decals on the same face. Before we were limited, one decal per face, and now they will export out to shared views as well. This is interesting. This is under general, but I think is kind of a pretty big deal. Is within iLogic, we now have a new event trigger called on Vault check-in. So upon Vault check-in, run this iLogic and do this. Up till now, we could do it on a save event, which you would always do before you check it in. I think that's interesting because now we have more ways to access that so that the rules can run in the background of that. And then we've got some ways that we can put these icons and put them on the menu. We can adjust what the icon looks like, so it's not a simple script. I could take that and I could change the icon for an iLogic command. So now we're getting, which I thought I remember I thought, man, that makes sense. I just want to put a button up there that runs this iLogic tool. We're getting toward that, right? So that's kind of a neat enhancement. I like the idea of the vault check-in event. I thought that was cool. There's a good addition to what we are working with that. And then those are just kind of general ones. Performance is something I mentioned just a moment ago, and this is what we've seen over the last several years. This has been a push where they've specifically, Autodesk has specifically looked at and worked with these tools so that they can, enhance the performance of that overall and get in there and make it better, I guess is what I'll say in general. And so what we've seen is they really focused on graphics and drawing. And if you look, it just says graphics, 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 graphics. That's been almost across the board, being able to improve that. For quite a few releases, 2018 through 21, it was all about drawing performance. And that was something that they were really focusing on, making drawings faster and faster. And I remember doing side-by-side comparisons and releases and all of that. It's definitely gotten significantly better with that. And this continues today. So things with model states, adaptivity, which I think is interesting. I actually haven't used a lot with adaptivity. Editing in place, the frame generator, save times. That's what they've put effort into, is enhancing the performance of each one of those, even on existing hardware. So it's not like you need better hardware for that. And none of this is anything I can show because it all sits there in the background, but those is some areas that they focused on for that. So let's take a look at some of these specific things. These are ones, again, stand out to me, I thought were interesting and actually useful. This was really modernized, the idea of the sheet metal interface. So they've been pushing toward having these different areas for this and having this different information in place. Where they've moved to the panelization. So as opposed to just having it set up within the dialog boxes like we typically would have, and again, if you go back to like the really old days and what that looked like, they were very kind of clunky looking dialog boxes. Now they've moved to this panel, and I honestly, when it first started happening, I'm like, okay, so it's a panel. I don't know if I get the exact reason for this. To me, it just kind of looks like a panel. What's the point? And I'm beginning to understand more and more. The point is how these things work together with the different tools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up. They actually enhance how we create things. And that surprised me. I didn't expect it to, but it definitely does. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up Inventor 2025, and I'm going to play around with the sheet metal component just to point this out a little bit. So I'm going to go to my Inventor 2025 here, and I'll do a sketch, and I'll just do a 12 by 12 here just to kind of start something out, right? Just classic to a 12-inch. There we go. And now, as I start to take a look at these sheet metal tools that we've had, they are all in these panels now. We don't have them anymore in the separate dialog boxes. Now, I'll say this one, not a whole lot that this is pretty standard, right? It kind of almost looks like the dialog box. The flange command, this gets interesting to me. It honestly becomes easier with how we're going to access these things. One thing I'll point out is we have presets, and these presets have been running through these versions of Inventor for a while. I really like presets. It feels like when I was doing production, I was creating a lot of the same stuff a lot of the time, right? It was, oh, it's another one of those. And then with presets, I could capture this particular preset and then reuse it again later. Matter of fact, I might do that just to kind of show that off. What I'll do here, though, is I want to point out about how they've updated the way we can access this information and edit the information that's in here. It becomes much easier to work with. I've got both for length and angle. That's just kind of built into that now, becomes part of it. And then I could come along and add edge sets in here, and I can just apply this and create a new flange. I can just immediately move to creating a new flange right off of this. I don't have to exit the dialog, restart the dialog, come back into it. I'm going to save this as a preset. This one that I just created here, and I'm just going to say okay. Right. Typically, I would just start within there. And the only reason I want to do that is I want to point out I can recall that preset, and it's just going to remember all the information for those edges, right? So I can pull down that preset and reuse that. And again, I could create that and then go right into creating another flange directly off of it, right? So very quickly, this is the first time that I saw these dialog boxes, or excuse me, saw these panels as a replacement for the dialog box and went, yeah. Because a lot of times when I'm not creating one flange, I'm creating a whole bunch of flanges when I'm doing something, and there's going to be a whole series to them. So the fact that I can easily select edges, easily pull up those presets and move through that, as well as that graphic in Canvas move around, being able to adjust the angle, being able to adjust the length, it's just a very clean interface for creating those types of things as part of that. So I like that a lot. I think that was a good addition. And again, it's really where the Canvas, where the panel stood out to me for one of the first times as a really functional tool. So let's take a look at part modeling. First, separate from sheet metal, is just the idea with part modeling. Just a few things within here. One of them is the finish feature. They've kind of extended that a little bit. There's quick access to the library. If you haven't used Finish before, it started in the previous release. And with what we can do with Finish is we can put in actual geometric finish information onto a particular face. We could simply color a face. The idea is, instead of affecting the whole part, we can take an individual face and say this is polished, that sort of thing. What we can do now when we're working with the finish feature is we have access to the library. There's easy include and exclude buttons that are part of it. Effectively, they've taken that and enhanced what it did and just taken it a little bit further. Another thing we have with the part modeling is the idea of when I do a simplification, whether it's doing a derived part or a simplification, we now have the option to set things up as a minimum bounding cylinder. Up till now, it's been a minimum bounding rectangle. Now I can take cylindrical objects and set them up as cylindrical. We'll see this in Derive. We'll see this in Make Part. We'll see this in Simplify as well. So, I like that because in some cases I would have a cylinder and it just ends up being, this chunky rectangle looking thing, and it kind of annoyed me. But now if we have a piston or something, we can derive it into a cylinder. They have updated the whole dialog box as well. There's 3 new drill types. They're actually very similar to previous drill types. It's just more in line with ISO information, where I've got a W, a V, and a Y drill type. That's really all about the point that's on there. So W is a flat bottom, V is a point that's on the end of the drill, and Y is the point but is included in the thread depth calculation. So that's part of where that comes in. That information all goes right into our whole notes, so all of that becomes part of it. And this is really just to put this in line with how ISO calls these things out, so that it's not a flat bottom or a point, it's a W, a Y, or a V. We can call that out. A couple other quick things here. We have part modeling that we can do. In part modeling, we've got these sketch patterns now include a boundary extents. So I'll point this out. This is going to be true in sketch patterns. It's going to be true in part patterns as well. Both of them use this same idea of having a boundary that I can work with. And this is interesting, and I'll show it. I don't know that I have a really good reason to use it yet. I was kind of looking at it, I'm like, okay, interesting, but I don't know what I have. So what we can do, and I'll pull up my Inventor here to kind of work with this. The idea would be, I can take I'll go through here and I'm going to take a look at this sketch. And I'm going to do a boundary, right? So, well, it helps if I pick what I'm going to do first. So, set up in here, and what I can include is a boundary. So I don't know. Somebody tell me, put it in the comments. When would we use this? It's here, and it's not immediately obvious. So I thought, well, I want to show that just so we can kind of get the idea of it. but I don't really understand when I would use that. So interesting. What I was saying is maybe if I started, so well, I know I have to base this off of this area, all my dimensions come off of a 0, 0 point, but I want to only capture the information inside this boundary. I don't know, I'm making stuff up. I just thought that was interesting how that worked, because now when I go to extrude, I'm only going to extrude things. It's, you know, the only options I have are things that exist within that boundary. Kind of interesting, but I guarantee this was someone's idea and they have an amazing use for that. And if you're on this meeting, I'd love to hear it. I do not. I don't know what it would be. All right. I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint here. Yeah, I just thought that was when I got into it, I'm like, that's so interesting. Let's take a look at some of the things we have with assembly modeling here. So one thing that they've added, which I really like, is with the bolted connection, we can follow patterns. We can follow circular or rectangular patterns. This was something that we could do with individual points within, we could do this with Content Center, but we could do it with the bolted connection tool. So now they've added this into the bolted connection tool. Works just like Content Center. I can add those components, I can add these in and follow a particular pattern that's in there. And it will not only follow a pattern that is a part pattern, but it will also follow an assembly feature pattern. So if you're using assembly features in weldments or in assemblies, it'll follow that as well. So it's a nice addition, you know, to what we've done before. I mentioned this already a little bit with the parts. It's the same idea. With the simplify command, when we replace as envelopes, we can replace them with cylinders. What I would love to do is be able to mix and match. I'd love some are cylinders, some are rectangles, but currently it's a choice of do you want to replace it as a cylinder or replace it as a rectangle when we're creating that. So anytime we have these circular components, though, that's going to become, it's a much more obvious, it displays the information in a much more realistic way than if we had just set that up otherwise. Okay, this one is interesting, and I really like this. The idea of color schemes that we have within here. So this is new, and this stood out to me immediately. When I first started using Inventor, I created a lot of components kind of like in the colors that you're seeing, right? I would just go through and set it up, say, hey, I don't care. Let's make it blue, make it purple, just so I can tell them apart from each other. Then we got more used to the idea of the color relating to the material, so I kind of got away from that. But in a large assembly, or when I have a weldment where I've got components that sandwich on top of each other, stack on top of each other, it can be tough to see sometimes what I'm looking at exactly. So I thought this was such a cool enhancement that they brought in. And it's the idea of, here I have what I would think of as kind of contemporary modern Inventor stuff, where everything is steel, right? Nothing's been painted yet. It's the color matches the material that we're making it from, and that is very common. I mean, I just feel like that's how we use it at this point. But it can be difficult to see. Where's the dividing line between those two? What's the thickness of the base? What's in here exactly? And we've got the motor and all these things. So I'm going to go over here to my view. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off those work features just so they're out of the way. But then I've got this cool thing called display separate colors. I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to say for each part, give me a different color. This affects nothing else. It doesn't affect the material. It doesn't affect anything I have in there. It's just a toggle for showing those up in different colors so that I can go find them. So now it's very obvious to me where one begins and where the other one ends and how these fit together. We can easily, there's a couple ways we can do that. I'm saying for each part, right? Every part, different color. I could say for each unique part, be a different color. So if it is the same part twice, it's going to be the same color. I can say for every top level assembly, right? Because if I look over here, I've got different assemblies in here. Just separate those out. And then I have for each unique top-level assembly, which I think should be about the same in this instance. Okay? So this is cool. It's very easy for me to go, what am I looking at? Oh, okay, gotcha. Now you notice it because each part, I've got like this galvanized rainbow of all these bolts going around. That's why each unique part is useful, because now it just puts those all as the same color. That's a little more obvious. By the way, while I'm here, notice just how I mentioned the enhancements, the general enhancements of picking on something and being able to view it. That is just so much more clear than it used to be, in terms of what I have selected, what's actually there. It's showing up those lines in the background. That display is just very clear as to what I'm picking, and it shows me the hidden behind the things. Something like this would just disappear. I could only see the part that I'm selecting. But anyway, colors, love them. I like how that comes in. I like showing each individual unique part as a separate color. I think that's really useful, as opposed to everything. And then this is a setting that I have here. If I take a look at my application options under colors, right? I've got customized schemes kind of hidden over here is separate colors. So I can choose what I want these different colors to be within there. So this is options that we have. You know, to me, it's especially if you have a large assembly. You know, I've seen where we've had full mezzanines and things, and it's just, I can't tell where the pieces start and end, and you're zooming in and you're picking on lots of things. This goes back to me, the early days of Inventor. This is how I drew a lot of stuff, just so I could see the different pieces and see that it was there. So I love that it's built into that now, and we have that as part of it. So very cool addition to the standard tools that we have. Some other small changes that we have within the presentation tool, for example, it has replace source model. And what it will do with that is it's just like replacing a model reference in a drawing. I can swap one out for another. So if there were some change that I had, and I said, actually, you know, we did all of these things with this presentation mode with assembly A, but we need to swap it out for assembly B, that is an option now. Right? If they're similar enough, it should honor a lot of the changes and things that you set up. If they're wildly different, just like a drawing, you've got some cleanup to do. Speaking of drawings, a couple little things that they've added within here. One, and I like this, is when I put in text, I can have presets. Again, we see this continuing theme of presets as we go through. So I could have a standard text tool that I want to drop in for that, and I can do that. We can fill it. We can have background color fill, so I could list something out that has a background color, and I can use parts list properties in a text box. So I can have a note that says item 4, and that item 4 matches what's on the parts list. If item 4 gets renumbered, it'll update in my drawing. That information comes right off of there. And that's one of those I'll walk through here because it's not immediately obvious where all that's at. They've added a few drawing styles. Really, it's more about support for ISO standards so that we can have that information built into it. All right, don't want to get in the vault just yet. We'll get there in a minute. I want to take a quick look at some of the things we have with these drawings. So I'll jump back over here to Inventor. All right, so I have a drawing set up here. This is just the little blower I was working with. And I went ahead and put in a bill of material. I shouldn't say bill of material. I put in a parts list. Parts list is always a representation of our bill of material. So I've got that in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some text. And when I put in this text, I have listed within here, see item. And then I want to pull an item number. I can go to parts list properties. I can choose which component I want to pull from that. And I'm going to pull item. Now I still have to tell it which item I'm pulling. So if you notice here, I can go to a list, and this is kind of hidden. You won't think of this right away. But I go to select parts list item. Now in my mind, I'm like, I want that one. And I just kept picking on it. And I'm like, what the heck? It's difficult to see here, and I don't know why it's so tight. Let's stretch these out a little bit. It's this box right over here. Yeah, see how tight those are? I can't even get to that one. It's this little box. I'm going to say I want that. It's a checkbox that I'm hitting. I'm pulling the information from that component. So I'm going to pull the item number from that. So I'm going to say see item 4, and I'm going to pull its description as well. Since I've already selected it, I should just be able to pull it in. And so it's pulling right from the properties of that parts list. I don't know, I'm making this up right now. For matching dimensions, sounds great, right? So it says see item 4, exhaust tube transitional for matching dimensions. That item 4 is exactly linked to this item 4. It's exactly linked to this description. So if I were to renumber that, put it in a different order, that's going to update and pull that through. So I like that I can point to that, and I can call out item numbers and link it to that so that I have that as part of it, and we're not going to worry about breaking that information, you know, because I've done it before. I've typed it in, and then I realize, oh, I updated it. I got to go change all of those places that I called it out. So it's kind of nice that they put that in there. The other thing I'll point out is this idea of presets. Right? I've got one here. This is an example of a preset, and it just says this is an example of a preset. It can be any text that you want. It can have any title that you want. You could have a whole block of text and then just pull it up as a preset, and it's going to drop in for you. So presets are great. I really feel like a lot of times with all the possibilities we have with Inventor, we tend to work within the same set of things. So the fact that we can set those up as presets and begin to use them is really, really useful. All right, I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint over here because the next thing I was going to take a look at was the idea of some new features within Vault. And there's a couple here that I'm like, that's really, really cool. I like how they set those up. So Vault in general, one thing they've done is they've set up the idea of working with PDFs a little bit differently. So commonly, PDF is the default format, right? Up till now, there was not an easy way to synchronize CAD file properties to PDF properties. So you would have a PDF that might have properties on it that was separate from your CAD property. So now we can map to a PDF file just the way we can map to an Office document, to an Inventor file, to an AutoCAD file. If it has properties on there, we can map them, and we can set it up so that we can synchronize the CAD file information to the PDF information. That way, it's always up to date, and we're not going to worry about those getting out of sync. You can edit the properties if they're directly, just like we can edit any property within Vault, and PDF thumbnails are in. So instead of just saying PDF like it always did, there's now a thumbnail image that we can view that's part of that. This is something, every time I do one of these, I say, yeah, there's all these cool new features, there's all these things we can do. It only works with Vault Professional. So I was so happy that now there is a new option within Vault Basic. Largely, it is the copy design functionality that was available within Vault Professional, and they've moved a lot of that to Vault Basic. They've updated the way that it works. So we can reset property values easily, find and replace names. We can define rules based on criteria. So it'll look at a file and run a specific action rule based on that file, based off that criteria. These are things we saw within Vault Professional that were not available in Basic. They've enhanced that now so that those two copy design tools are effectively identical. Professional can still do a few things because it has its own naming conventions and some different concepts like that. But realistically, they've really enhanced the copy design that we have in. I'm going to show this one off. This is, I think, this is a great addition. We have criteria-based search, and I'll show how we can use that and some different ways we can filter things. And it's really, we can set up filters and then we can apply those filters as part of this. So I thought this was pretty cool. I'll be logged into my Vault as an administrator. So as an administrator, it'll be what we call a distributed search. Everybody's going to have access to it. So I can set up distributed searches so that everyone on my team has access to them and can begin using them. So that's, again, it's the neat addition to the tool sets that we've had up to this point so that I can start using that. So I'll point this out. Right now, if I go to this, it just looks like Vault always did, right? When I go to do a search, it's the same search tools I've seen all along. So I have to set this up. So initially, I'm going to go to Find, and I'm going to go here and look for, I'll do a very simple one. I'm going to say material contains steel. And I'm going to add that in. So super simple, standard, type of search that I would run. So I have all of these things that is true of. I'm going to save this. And I can save it as a folder, but I'm going to save it as a distributed search. I'll show you what that means. It's the naming might not make sense at first, but now if I come down here and I'm looking in models, assemblies, I'll look here in components, I'm looking at all this information, I now have apply criteria of material is steel. So before I even type in a part number, before I type in anything else, I can use that as a filter. That becomes a criteria that it's going to look through this for. And now I can type, let's say 2. Let's do something simple like that, right? Oh, figures, I don't have anything that matches that exact criteria. So now, as I come in here and run that search, it's going to go find, based off of my criteria, information that matches that. So this is a neat, and this criteria can be literally anything. It can, whatever we search on, we can save that as criteria to look for later. So I could say, I want to look through everything here in a criteria of project 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to look through here where it's only IAM components. Whatever it might be, we can save those, and that gets saved over here, just like the saved searches. These are I have distributed searches that are here. So I've got their saved searches, here's distributed ones. And if I take a look at that, I can rename them, copy them, edit them, delete them, right? That is just here for me to go through, and I can edit and work with as part of that. I think that's cool. This is something that, the fact that as an administrator, I can set up standard search criteria, publish them out, and have multiple people activate them and work with them. That to me is very, very beneficial. And it's something that you would hope as an administrator you could do. You could go access this thing. So very cool. I love the distributed searches. You won't, the big thing I want to point out to you guys, if you jump into your Vault and say, let's look at these distributed searches, when you first go in, this box will not be here unless you have saved distributed searches created. Then you can do it. So you have to set them up first. Then it becomes active for you to go select. All right, we are nearing the end. I said 40 minutes, and I'm running over. Right? Well, I guess we had some discussion points with, hey, can people hear me? But so that's a big one. This is also interesting. This is email notifications on life cycle changes. So when you have a life cycle change, you can say, when I change this to released, email this group or email these different people. There are certain templates that can be created for this. And this is built into Vault. This is core Vault functionality. If you're thinking, man, I've heard that before, I swear we do that already, you may have IMAGINiT's Vault utilities, because we wrote a utility that does this exact thing that we distributed to our clients. And obviously it was successful because it's been picked up by core Vault. So if you didn't have the utilities, you have this would be available in 2025. Before 2025, you'd be using IMAGINiT's Vault utilities. And there's a whole other series of tools in those utilities that may be beneficial to take a look at. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. I'd be glad to walk you through them. A few things with backup and restore. I hit this really hard with last year. This was actually part of my Autodesk University talk, how we can back up just the databases, how we can back up specific vaults. That's now been built into the being able to, when I do a scheduled vault backup, we can include that where we have selective backup for that as well. And there's also this is administrative as well. We can deploy from the client side. We can deploy things such as views. I mentioned the saved searches already. I can deploy shortcuts to everyone. So if I'm the administrator, I can set it up so that everyone has those shortcuts. Everyone has the same shortcuts. Everyone has the same saved searches. Everyone has exactly the same grid view. Before now, this was something that was difficult. I mean, we could do it, but basically we'd copy an XML file to each one, put it in the right location. Now it's being handled from the administrative. It just goes out to everyone. Next time they log in, they have that information. It's already there. So I really like that ability and like that functionality. I also like this one. This was part of my AU talk as well. They've added the idea of being able to purge files as part of a lifecycle transition. So if I move from work in progress to release, it can purge unneeded versions of that as it goes. This is really nice. Purging is one of those things, you can do it with a script, you can do it on an as needed basis, but I really like how it goes through and does this for all these users. And I apologize, my Outlook is just hitting me left and right. One last thing here with Vault, they have updated, again, from the administrator side, we can maintain a secure environment where we have specific password lengths that we can pull in here. So we can say there's a minimum password length. It has to include lowercase, has to include uppercase. Realistically, yeah, it's kind of cool that it's there. Most of the time, I'm using Active Directory, setting up Active Directory for clients. So interesting. I don't know if it's the, some people might use it. I think Active Directory may be a better way to go for that, so that we can more easily navigate to that. There's also some administrative tools for the thin client where we can go through and just, if we're using items, we can turn off the files workspace. If we're only using files and not items, we can turn off the items workspace. And so we've got more control over what's visible when they log in. You can also set up a custom logo. You've got just some more control over what that's going to look like when they go in there.